Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is just after 1 o'clock, and we are here to talk about what you need to know, what you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Now, I have gone into my history, I've gone into my archives, and I have pulled up one of my favorite people for today, and that is the powerhouse, Dee Marshall. Dee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I can't even begin to describe, when I knew you and we were in a program together, wow, you were successful. I mean, you were really making leaps and bounds in the world of talent and diversity and engagement. But you have gone off the scale in the last couple of years. And so I want to dive in today for those who are watching the show who may not know you. Tell us who Dee Marshall is.
First of all, thank you again for having me. I'm an accidental business owner, but for the purpose of the show, for the purpose of the show, I will say I am the CEO at Diverse and Engage, where we speak three languages: leadership, development, workplace culture, and diversity. And our corporate clients, they retain us whenever or when they have a challenge attracting, engaging, or retaining diverse culture, diverse workplace culture. I wear a number of other hats, but it's all within diverse and engaged. So some may follow the show and know that I am a podcaster. I co-host a show, Roundtable Talk, with none other than the amazing Mita Malik, who an executive, a C-suite executive in and of herself. She's a super badass in terms of marketing and culture. I wear that hat. I serve in a number of capacities. WeBank, for those watching who may know WeBank, Women Business Enterprise National Council. I serve on a forum and the steering committee, the leadership there, which really tells my story, Meredith, of
Mhm.
just really being about a big champion of women, a champion of people of color. And so, I'll say this and then I'll pause for background. But my backstory is I was a Wall Street girl. I trained $1 million producers on Wall Street for many years. I was there on September 11th. By trade, my background was training and development, but I continued to follow the path of leadership development. Really, how do leaders become successful? So that's really part of the backstory. But I'll bring us up to present day and hot topic, which I know we're going to get into. And that is, Meredith, in the last few minutes or so, I'm going to say few minutes or so in my space in corporate, there's a lot of conversation around ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And it really is about being responsible as a leader. And I know we're going to talk about it, responsible as a business owner. And we have been responsible in terms of creating space for all people, and historically those who have been underrepresented, whether it's people of color and or women. And so again, if I have to frame my story, Meredith, I really, while I sit here at Diverse and Engage, I really am a big champion of women and people of color.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the backstory.
Well, and that is exactly what we are going to get to today, because I think over the last couple of years, certainly talent has become one of the foremost issues facing organizations today, just talent in general. And then you layer on putting women in positions of leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and just what all of that means. But I want to shoot a quick video. We'll jump in and get ready, audience, because this is going to be one powerful conversation. All right, Dee. Now, I think you were far too modest, because I really think of you when I follow you on LinkedIn as truly a thought leader, as an innovator in this space. And I love the fact that when I was reading up on you, is how you describe what you do is saying, I help leaders solve problems by attracting diverse talent
Yep.
to the organization.
Yeah.
I want to start by, I just love that fact that it's it isn't something you have to do. This is the path to solving the problems and the issues that are facing you today. So, really, in the last couple of years, why has talent become such an issue, and why are we at such a critical space today with it?
Yeah, so I think talent has become hot topic, a priority, and leaning all in on focus. Of course, because talent is how businesses operate. It's how businesses become profitable, and it's not just about the product or the service or the commodity or the widget. It's about the people, right? For all of business, it's always been about the people. And so that's sort of the baseline. But why there is the focus that we have now is for this reason. One, you know, Gen millennials have now surpassed boomers in terms of US population, right? And because now Gen Y, they are somewhere around, I think the last number that I read was 73 million in the US, and boomers are 70 million in the US. And so with that shift, there was a change in work and talent. So that was one part of why there is a focus on talent, because there was a shift. And so all of the old rules are now outdated, or there was a little bit of friction, or of, the need to embrace generationally, right? 5 generations in the workplace culture. So that was one part of why there is a big focus. Also, what we should know about millennials and Gen Y is, in fact, we no longer need to say millennials, because millennials is an othering, right? It says that there is a majority over here and millennials are other. They are not like us over here. But we no longer need to say that. Why? Because millennials make up 37% of the US workforce. So they are the largest demographic, right? So if we're talking about why all of the focus on talent, that's reason number two. Here's another reason. Millennials are the largest and the most diverse. And so the largest domestic emerging market is 51% people of color. And so, if the largest US domestic emerging market is people of color, then again, that supports the workforce and the consumer market, the target market for business leaders. They need to be able to connect with
Yeah,
the largest domestic emerging market, right? If you're in business, how are you going to connect? And so that also put a spotlight, or the spotlight, on you need workers, you need talent who understands the consumer. Okay, so that's a third. I'll give you one more, Meredith, and this is since the diversity tipping point. The reason why so much focus, I'll give you two more, so much focus on talent right now is the diversity tipping point, which was the period beginning May of 2020, when corporate America, for the very first time, acknowledged that we are anti-racist and Black lives, air quotes, do matter, right?
uh-huh.
And that was as a result of, right, we were amidst a global reckoning of racism against Black people in this country. Okay. And so, with that, then corporations, they made outward charitable contributions, some would say performative, and, a number of things. But then they doubled back and reprioritize diversity 3.0 to focus on race and culture. So that's another last reason, Meredith, for everybody. I'm sure all of the leaders here and the professionals here will know this last one. Everybody say ESG in the chat. ESG,
Yeah,
environmental social governance. So right now in corporate America, chief procurement officers, C-suite are having conversations right now about how they meet their ESG guidelines, right? And that was part of 190 something countries got together and agreed on 17 sustainable goals. Everybody say sustainable. How we are going to sustain the planet, sustain people, and then sustain profits. And so, because ESG has to do with how we are going to sustain people and then people in the workplace, that or all of those reasons are why there is so much focus and talk about people and talent in the workplace. So I know that was a long answer.
Yeah, it's interesting
Some of
though.
those, yeah, those are some of the reasons why talent, because that social piece narrative was about employee activism, right?
Mm.
Because the rules have changed. The rules have changed, everybody. There's new rules in the workplace. And so I'm going to stop there, Meredith. But those are all of the reasons why there is so much focus on talent right now. I was just at a conference. My last speaking engagement this year was with ISIMS, the Inspire conference, and they were
Yeah.
all our executives. And that's what I shared with them.
So let me ask you this: is it what are the obstacles and the roadblocks that leaders today? I mean, because what you just shared is a lot. I mean, it's a lot to think about. I mean, wow, I didn't even realize that 51% of the population identifies as, as people of color, and that target market, you really got to have talent that relates to, that connects to, that understands. But I imagine even though we're moving through this shift, still the majority of leadership remains a group that may struggle a little bit more to understand. So one of my questions around that is, do you feel like we're we're starting to make the shifts and starting to understand, or it's clearly just going to be the companies that get it that are going to get out ahead?
Yeah, so I think it's both, man. I think definitely there are some major players who are, I think well on their journey, and doing what needs to be done to, I think, educate, to create the education and the awareness that leadership now needs to have, because right now the rules of leadership have changed.
Hmm.
So it's now inclusive leaders, like inclusive leadership. So every leader, every people manager needs to understand now inclusive leadership, meaning how to lead through a multicultural lens. So how we are working with our clients to help them really navigate this challenging space for some people, right? It's
Right.
challenging, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, right? This country has a dark history of us, none of us being educated. I'm going to be quite honest. So for everyone who's watching, so many of us, it doesn't matter if you're male or female or non-binary, if you identify she, her, they, them, if you identify as Black, as African American, as Haitian American, as Cuban American, the country we haven't done the best in K through 12 undergrad. You'd have to go to grad school and study culture and study American history to understand this. So we really work with our clients just to help them understand cultural competence. So it's not just about understanding bias and unconscious bias. Our biggest gap, or one of the things that I see that gets leaders in trouble and gets them on the diversity fail or the diversity news headline, is just really not understanding cultural competence, right? Inclusive culture, so that leaders understand how to lead the people now through a multicultural lens. It's like taking off these glasses. If I am a white cis male, I now have to put on the frame of a woman, or at least try the
Yeah.
frame of a person of color, to be able to see through a different lens. Not everybody is going to get it, but leaders who are going to win, they get it.
So let me ask you this. I just got asked a question by one of our audience members who said, "Look, I'm just trying to fill a hole. I'm so desperate for talent. I'm struggling." He said, "I just really hadn't thought like this." Where do begin? Where do you start if you hadn't even started down this path? Where does an organization and leaders need to start with their own education around this?
Yeah, yeah. So good question. And I do understand. We hear that all the time.
I
Like, look,
bet.
we just need to start. It's overwhelming. It's a lot. It's sometimes nerve-wracking to think about what you're going to say, do not do, and what may not go over well. So the education and awareness, I'm going to say, always start with cultural competence, just understanding the diverse dimensions in the workplace. So understanding people who identify differently in terms of race, in terms of culture, in terms of neurodiversity, LGBTQ. So you need to educate your staff. Educate yourself and your staff. So you start there with the education and awareness of the diverse dimensions. So we teach cultural competence. We have training called moving from uncomfortable to comfortable conversations around race and identity, because that's where you can start. You can start there. Then you can start, when you're looking for talent, look at building pipeline programs with in the demographics where you really want to diversify, whether they're professional organizations. We always, I mean, we have like a D&I, a toolkit. So for some of our clients, they want to do it themselves. They get the toolkit. For some who want to do it with us, we say, come on over here. Some need fractional CDOs, and we offer that as well. But I'll give it to you straight. You can build pipeline programs with professional organizations where diversity is represented, right? You can build affinity types of programs, even if you're a small business, but invite other companies in to partner, because what that does is that builds the comfort and that helps you to create pipeline to source talent. And then the last is use a sourcing or HR company. You can outsource that now, right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
outsource that and look for partners who are diverse. Look for a diverse owned HR or staffing or recruiting firm. We have several partners because we tell our clients, hey, we don't do that piece, but we have several partners. So do that. Or if you're already working with an HR consultant now or a staffing firm that is a majority owned or majority led, encourage them to partner, to sub contract a company, not a person, a company that is diverse owned. So let's just say if Meridith, if it's your company, you own the HR company, and your clients, they don't want to get rid of you, that's fine. Then you, Meridith, you retain my company if we do HR staffing. And so now we are a sub. We are a sub.
Okay.
Do you see? Don't hire me to come work for you, Meridith. How you're going to get a bigger win for yourself and your client is if you have a partner, you have a diverse partner, because now even you as
Yeah.
a white owned or white led, you are equalizing. You're now playing the equity game. You have now entered the chat, as they like to say, and you have responsibly partnered with another company who has expertise in sourcing people of color, neurodivergent, LGBTQ, veterans, disabled. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. So you might have answered the next question an audience member has, and that is, I live in a small community. How do you define diversity? We don't have many people of color in our community. What should I be looking for? I love this question because how do you define diversity? I mean, you know, I used to, when I lived in Washington, D.C., it always made me laugh because it's the place where I've lived where we looked the most different, but I felt like we all had the same background. I mean, we were all college educated. We all had good jobs. We all had those types of things versus living in some other communities. I've worked alongside people who maybe didn't go to college and people who came from big families, small families, wealthy backgrounds, poor backgrounds. What does diversity really mean in
Yeah,
today's
yeah.
marketplace?
Yeah, it means, representing the fabric of the region or the space that you live and reside. So,
Oh,
for
I love
example,
that.
it's the country, it's the US. So, your standard or your benchmark, Meredith, is number one, look at the US population as a definition of diversity, right?
Mhm.
Because there you're going to see representation of male, female, and at some point, I'm sure there'll be non binary, right?
Right.
But now you will also see of the US population, everybody, you're going to see the breakdown of the top 7 racial ethnic groups. So that's one place to start. Another place to start, Meredith, is, and this might be easier, is for some companies, look at who your consumers are. So how are you making your money? And I'm going to give you an example. The beauty industry was really kind of sort of called out on the carpet during the diversity tipping point because they were largely majority. However, they make their profits off of women and women of color.
Right.
That's another definition, everybody. Look at number 2. Where do you make your money? How are you benefiting? So you want to be a leader and a company who is responsible to say, you know what? We live in a majority population here where there's no diversity. There is little diversity where I live in the Midwest of XYZ. However, Our products, they are majority, I'm going to make this up, Latino, love our products. 80% of our profits come from Latino women or Asian women or Black and Brown people. And so, because your profits are there, that's how you can identify, okay, we want that to be our bar. So, we want our workforce percentage to look like our consumers, or we want our workforce to look like the US population. Does that make sense, Meredith?
It makes so much sense, and it just sounds really, really smart. I mean, it's so important to look like who you're targeting. There's a large financial services firm that I was doing a lot of work for, and they really made a very conscious decision to go after the female market. And
Yep.
when they made that conscious decision, they looked inside the walls. I mean, they then put in, when they had an opening, they moved in a female CEO.
Mhm.
They started a whole division to really try to move women into financial service representatives, as well as
Mhm.
those who went up into their $1 million group. I mean, to your point, they said, if this is going to be our target market, we need to look like our target market. I think that is so smart and so well answers the question, you know, who do you need to be diverse among? Yeah.
Yeah, and let me tell you how you can do that. So for everybody here, I've heard this. Our clients say that,
Yeah.
we have a client up in Portland, Maine, and there's no diversity. They're there, but they are the yummiest leaders there. They're super bad all day. I respect what they're doing. They're a high growth company. They're growing really fast. So what you can do until you can find the talent, I gave you programs. I gave you
Yeah.
affinity types of group. Hire, retain vendors. So
Oh,
make your
yes.
supply chain, right? So make your supply chain diverse. If you can't get the W-2s or the independent contractors just yet, although I do believe you can do that. You know why?
Mhm.
Because now you have a global, your talent is not limited geographically. So we
That's
can no
right.
longer use that. So for leaders who are watching, you no longer want that to be your response, because it'll be an indication that you're a leader that may be out of touch. You now
Right.
want to understand that no, you're sourcing from all over. However, keep in mind, you can, with your supply chain. So, who's providing your marketing services, your payroll services, your bookkeeping services? Definitely, if you are a Fortune 500, this is easier for you to do, right? You can go to those organizations that are the third party certifying bodies, and you can play there and look for women, look for minorities, right? That's NMSDC. Look for women at WeBank. Look for LGBTQ at NGLCC, right? You can look for disabled in, or I think it's disability in, right? So you can now engage there and make it your point that your strategy might be through the supply chain and through the workforce at the same time. And certainly we're always here. I mean, we do this work. So I hope that's helpful,
But
Meredith.
it's so incredibly valuable. I love this idea of diversifying your supply chain, looking for those, being conscious when you're, because it's so easy for you when you look for a virtual assistant or somebody to do your graphics. I mean, I think about my team. My goodness, I mean, we're all over the world from such different perspectives, and the value that that is to me. I go back to where we started when you said that, basically in your write up is what you do is you help people solve problems, the problems of growth, the problems of retaining talent, the problems of making sure you are able to grow and attract customers. It begins with diversifying, understanding where the population is going, where your customers are going, and moving your talent pool. It is hard to believe, but we have about come to the end of our show. I always like to close with a couple of questions. The thing is, as we film this and we're headed into 2023, the level of uncertainty seems to be growing rather than retracting. The world seems to be becoming more and more uncertain. What is your biggest piece of advice for business owners, leaders, top corporations out there struggling with turning uncertainty to competitive advantage? What is your advice? And then, of course, tell everybody where they can follow you, learn more about all of your wisdom around diversity, engagement, and talent today.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good question about, how do leaders move into uncertainty? And I would say there's so much I could say about it. So I have a couple really quick thoughts. I think I'm going to go personal here because at this point, we're bringing all of ourselves to the table and to the workplace. And I always start from a place of being thankful, being grateful, and being prayerful. And so I think right now you have to bring all of you into whatever work that you're doing in order to navigate being uncertain. So what I mean by that is, as a leader myself, just being very real with who I am. So I'm a woman of faith. So I'm praying. So, right, it's no longer a division of church and state, but just really being the best that I can be helps me to be better in uncertainty. And so that's why I start off with being very thankful for where we are right now, being very careful for how we navigate. And I've done this since the pandemic. Thankful, and then careful, and then prayerful, because that's who I am, right, at the core. And so that's that. The second piece of advice is, I would say, disrupt yourself. Disrupt yourself. So everything that is routine and regimen, as of January 1, 2020, I made a conscious decision to disrupt myself. I knew that we had a big assignment to go to another level. So I'm like, everything that we're doing, or at least some of these things that we're doing, we're complete. So for leaders watching, just be okay. Repeat after me, hashtag in the chat, complete. We are complete with this thing that we've been doing for 10 years, for 5 years, for 7 years, because we're going to put down this thing that we've been doing for this long. We're going to put it down and free up our hands to be ready for whatever is next. So disruption and disrupting ourselves, our routine, and everything that we're bound to, if it's not our core value and core of who we are, just learning to disrupt ourselves, to be prepared to do an environmental scan of what is happening in the world right now, and what do I need to be thinking about different? What do I need to be thinking about new? Because right now we're in the land of new rules. The workers' agreement and contract is being rewritten, and nothing will remain the same. So I'm Dee Marshall. You can find us at diverseandengaged.com, www.diverseandengaged.com. And here on LinkedIn, I'm so grateful for LinkedIn. We're on a podcast here, the LinkedIn Podcast Network. It's called Brown Table Talk. It's for women of color and allies. So we invite you to join in there. Grateful for LinkedIn. I was named this year 2022 LinkedIn Top Voice for racial equity and equality. And and I think there's that. Thank you so much, Meridith.
Thank you. It was awesome to have you, and we will load this up, put it in a podcast. And for all of you, I really encourage you to follow Dee Marshall. It is such good information about what you need to understand around talent and remaining relevant in today's marketplace. So we'll put everything that she talked about in the show notes. Dee, so thank you. So great to reconnect with you again. We'll see you all right back here next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Remember, today's marketplace may be challenging, but you can be successful. Disrupt yourself. I love that, Dee.